just about to begin, all right? We're going to give it a few seconds for the machinery to kick in and in place. And Bezrat Hashem, we're going to learn some Gemara today. We have a bit of a Talmudic back and forth discussion, especially about the shofar blowing in the Holy Temple. And the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, which Bezrat Hashem will be rebuilt very, very soon. All right, I'm not sure how to explain that in a practical, political way, but in a spiritual way, that will be something so awesome that the world will change forever when that third temple is built. Bezrat Hashem, and we're hoping and we pray every day, every Jew. Okay, listen, you Muslims out there, every Jew in the world prays 3 times a day for the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem. Now, does that mean that we're coming to attack you? No, because we're not allowed to start fights on our own, right? But God has a lot of ways of doing things, okay? Now, if you decide that you want to stand in God's way of rebuilding the temple, that's your problem, and that's exactly why many of you are suffering, because you're standing in God's way. If you got out of God's way and allowed the temple to be built in a way in a peaceful manner, then your lives would be a lot better. You would probably have a lot, to be honest with you, you'll have a lot of blessings. Anybody that does that will be blessed tremendously. Oh, we have Boiker Toy from Louise. She's already here. She waited for this. All right? Anyways, but yes, we're going to speak about the shofar blowing in the Holy Temple that's about to be built. And again, God has a lot of ways of doing things, even though right now, in the current political situation, it doesn't necessarily make sense that this temple will be rebuilt, but that situation could change instantaneously when God decides that it's time to rebuild the temple. That's it. It's coming. That's it. Anyways, ready to go? I want to remind you guys, if you are online, that you should immediately subscribe and hit the bell so that you're constantly reminded every single time that we upload this video, that we go live, okay? And you should also share this with all your friends on WhatsApp, on Facebook, on groups, whatever you have, so that they could appreciate the same lessons that you are appreciating, okay? Good? Let's continue. Ready to go? We are on Talmud Tractate Rosh Hashanah 27a. We are dealing with the quote from the Mishnah. It's actually the second quote on this page from the Mishnah. The Mishnah that we learned a couple of days ago tells us that in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, when they blew the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, there was 2 horns on either side of the shofar, metal horns, not trumpets. We're not calling them trumpets. I told you this already before. Okay, they're not trumpets. Trumpets are these squiggly, squaggly things that go around and they have buttons. That's a trumpet. A horn in the temple was one straight horn, and that's it. They used to blow. It was like straight horn made out of metal, and that was called chatzoitzrois, or that's plural. Plural is chatzoitzrois, is plural for these horns. Unfortunately, some idiot decided to translate this as trumpets. They apparently didn't know what trumpets are, or they didn't know what the horns in the temple were. One of the two they didn't really understand. Okay? So they're not trumpets, they're horns. Now, that is what we're discussing. We're discussing what is going on with these horns that are being blown on Rosh Hashanah. We said there's a shofar in the center blowing, and then there's 2 shofars on either side. We actually said that the shofar blows a little longer than the horns because the shofar is the main thing to be blown on Rosh Hashanah. And therefore, in the Holy Temple, even though they did blow the horns, but the horns would stop before the shofar would stop. Okay, so you would hear all 3 of these, the shofar and the 2 horns on either side blowing. Then all of a sudden you'd hear the horns stop, you'd hear the shofar continue further, and then that was a symbol that the main concept of Rosh Hashanah has to do with blowing the shofar, and the horns are secondary to that. However, the horns did need to be blown. All right? Good. Shimon, you ready to go? So let's try to understand how the Gemara deals with analyzing and trying to pick out what type of issues there are. The Gemara starts out with a brilliant question. And the Gemara says as follows: Utrei koli mi mishtame. Are 2 voices, are 2 sounds heard simultaneously? Now, again, you're a human being. Perhaps you could only hear one sound at a time. Perhaps you are not able to hear two different sounds at a time. Do you think you could hear two different sounds at the same time?
Yes.
I think you could.
The orchestras of 100 different musicians and 100 different...
100, exactly. You have an orchestra, and in an orchestra you have a whole list of musicians in every orchestra, and you hear all the sounds together combined. So I don't understand, what type of question is this in the Gemara? Why is the Gemara asking, are two sounds heard? Obviously, two sounds could be heard, right? You hear two sounds together. What kind of question is this in the Gemara? Why is the Gemara asking such a seemingly stupid question, right? And the Gemara doesn't ask stupid questions, yeah? The mitzvah is to hear the kol shofar, therefore what?
So if you hear the chatzitzot and kol shofar, you cannot
Yeah.
only this one or that one.
Okay, but you could hear both of them at the same time. Why not? And then you hear, why not? Why not? What's wrong? Why can't you hear?
The mitzvah is to hear.
Okay, so the mitzvah is to hear the shofar. Are you hearing the shofar? Yes, you're hearing the shofar. You're hearing the shofar together with the trumpet.
It's not a pure shofar.
Says who? So why does that make a difference halachically? Who told you? Who told you that halach? Okay,
You hear a new sound. It's not either one of them.
you're saying that you're hearing a combined sound, which is not one sound and not the other sound.
The question should say...
And who said that that's an issue?
I did.
You decided that's an issue.
I did.
Right now, Moses is a prophet from 3,000 years ago, and comes Yosef Zohar, and Yosef Zohar decides that he knows what Moshe meant.
That's what I'm trying to say, man.
That's not the way the Talmud thinks. Okay, the Talmud thinks in a much deeper way.
So if they would,
Okay, the very yes,
No, the
because
question should be then.
Huh?
So then the question should be what they're saying.
what's the question?
No, are you allowed to hear the shofar together with another sound? No, can you hear two
Again,
together?
the question of the Talmud was, can two sounds be heard together?
I'm saying so it makes more sense to ask, can you hear the shofar together?
Oh, so the rabbis of the Talmud, these brilliant Jews that lived 2,000 years ago, they asked the question, and you're telling them that, listen, rabbis, you misworded the question. We have a better way to word that question.
Based on his hypothesis.
Yeah.
Can two sounds
Yeah.
be together? Like, is it halachically permitted for both sounds to be heard at the same time?
The Mishnah just told you that you hear both of these together.
Yeah, but then one of them goes further, so you hear it separately.
Yes, and what's the question?
So I'm saying, like,
So what's the problem?
does the hearing it together go to you hearing it, or does the hearing it separately go to you hearing it?
That's not what we're asking. We're asking here in the Gemara, how on earth did the rabbis say that we have shofars blowing together with the chatzotzros when seemingly two sounds cannot be heard together? And the reason why I am focusing on this is because if you want to be a proper Talmudist, you must properly understand the question. If you don't properly understand the question, you miss the point. Okay? If you think that the Gemara is actually trying to ask you, is it physically possible to hear two sounds at once?
Wrong.
That's not what the Gemara is asking. Because the Gemara is essentially accepting that the Mishnah is accurate. Okay, remember, in the Talmudic era, they accepted that the Mishnaic era was in fact accurate. They're not arguing with the accuracy of the actual Mishnah. Okay? What they're trying to do is they're trying to understand the reasoning behind the Mishnah. Okay? Now,
Look at this guy.
what, he has something? Well, hold on. We have our moderator, Mr. Moderator. Are you involved over here?
Of course.
Yeah, what's going on?
Talmudic comment and question.
Okay, what's the question?
Turn the mic on.
Did you turn the mic on? You have to listen. You be a moderator. You have to do it properly.
Talmudic Tom says, while trumpet isn't the best name for those things, it isn't wrong. The name for a straight trumpet, herald's trumpet, could be called a bazine.
A bazine. So now we learned a new word, a bazine. That I don't even know if I pronounce it right. We're going based on the spelling here. But again, the fact is that if you say the word trumpet today, it means something that's not what was blown in the temple. In the temple, maybe they blew a bazine, maybe they blew a herald's trumpet, I don't know what you want to call it. But if you actually just say the word trumpet, it means today, in today's society, I'm not sure what it means in the Webster's dictionary. Okay, that's not what we're arguing over here, what's in the Webster's dictionary or in somebody else's dictionary. We're talking about the way people understand when you say the word trumpet. right? When you say the word trumpet, you're not thinking of a straight horn. You're thinking of a wiggly waggly horn. Wrong thing. Okay, listen, guys. Excuse me. If you want to join the class, you're welcome. Otherwise, no walking around this room. No. No. Unless you want to say hi to the audience over here. You want to say hi to the audience?
It's a safer.
He just needs a book. He's such a holy boy. He's learning all the books. He has nothing. Can I know how? Anyways, good. Let's go back to what we're saying over here. By the way, somebody asked me yesterday, I just want to clarify this. Somebody asked me yesterday, how come there's so many people walking in the background? So I think people need to understand what a yeshiva is. A yeshiva is, some people might call it a rabbinic seminary or a Jewish religious institution, right? Listen, let me tell you something. If you didn't realize this, Jews are nuts. We're crazy. Nuts in the head. Everything, the way things work in the Jewish people, is mad. Okay, somebody once came to a rabbi and says, "Listen, Rabbi, I don't accept organized religion." So he says, "Listen, religion, I'm not sure if we're a religion or not. Organized, we're definitely not. Definitely not organized. That's one thing, right?" Anyways, when you come to this type of yeshiva, it's kind of, yes, some people come to my class and they're listening and they're behind me over here. Sometimes they pop their head into the screen and they say something. And then there's a room behind me, which is the study hall, which people who don't want to come to my class, what idiots. They should all come to my class. What's wrong with them? But those guys that think that they have other things or better things that they want to study, they study in the room behind me. And that's also part of the yeshiva. And different people have different things that they're studying. Okay, that's the way it's working. So the people that are running around in the background, they're not wasting their time. They're also students and they're studying their brains out with the Talmudic brilliance. All right, some choose to learn it from me directly here in this room, and some people decide to be in the room behind me and they learn it on their own. So that's just a bit of an explanation on what's going on over here. Now let's get back to what is the topic at hand. Now, as I'm trying to tell you, that the Gemara is not going to ask a logical question on the Mishnah. If the Gemara is asking a question on the Mishnah, it's not a logical question, it's a halachic question. Now, a halachic question is only significant when there's a contradiction between two rabbis in the Mishnaic era, or perhaps not when there's a contradiction between two rabbis, or perhaps when there's a contradiction between halachot. Okay, so when the Gemara asks a question, and that's why I asked the question to you guys, because I want to train you guys how to understand Gemara properly. If you're going to think that the Gemara is asking a practical question, could people hear two sounds at once or not? No, because the Mishnah already said that we blow the two trumpets together, and then we blow together with the shofar, and we extend the shofar. Now the only thing the Gemara is really trying to figure out is this halachically viable or halachically consistent with the other teachings that exist. You understand? And that's why it's asking this question. So it asks this question, but immediately after asking this question, the Talmud is going to bring a source which would seem to contradict this rule. So really, this is kind of a rhetorical question. The Gemara is basically saying that based on this Mishnah, it seems that two voices could be heard together. So the question really is, Utrei koli mimishtame, are two voices heard together? Which means it sounds from the Mishnah, two voices seem to be together. Right? It's kind of a rhetorical question, but then it goes into why that should not be. And then it says as follows, it's going to quote from another Mishnah, or actually from a Braisa. It's going to quote from a Braisa. For those of you who are not aware, a Mishnah is the official book that was written by Rabbi Yehuda Hanossi. Braisa were other recordings of teachings of the same era, of the Tanaic era. The Tanaic era began approximately 100 years before the second temple was destroyed, and it continued about 200 years after the destruction of the temple. So we're talking about approximately 300-year period with what we call the Tanaic era. The Braisa also comes from that era, and the Mishnah was an official codification of that era's teachings, but there were also some unofficial teachings as well. They were called Braisas, and they are considered to have halachic weight. They are considered to hold authority as well, right? I wouldn't say 100% equal, but close to equal, which means close to equal. If we had a choice to choose a Mishnah or a Braisa, we'd choose the Mishnah. However, there are certain times where there's reason to choose a brisa over the Mishnah, and the Gemara, the Talmud will very often conclude that the halacha is like a brisa and not like the Mishnah. It will. All right? So, what's that? What's the brisa is the same time period as the Tanaic period. Again, Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, he wrote specific rulings in the Mishnah that he personally felt A, was necessary, and B, he also felt that that was the final halacha. Now, there were people that didn't agree with him and thought that other things were the final halacha, and that's why there's the brises that very often record the other halachas, or the other opinions as to what the halacha is. Also, Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, very often, he tried to write a very short and concise book, not writing any extra words. So very often, when we're not exactly sure why the Mishnah said something, we very often have a brisa that will elaborate as to the reasoning of the Mishnah.
So you said
You understand?
passed it in a certain direction already.
What's that?
Rabbi Yehuda Nasi already like he passed it in a certain direction.
Right.
Already, like,
Again, he had his
like making
opinions.
his
Not
Shulchan
everybody...
Aruch, it's like making his word,
Right,
was like
correct,
his word.
right. By the way, every single work that exists from the time of Moses all the way down to now, actually the truth is not the Bible, the Tanakh. We don't argue with the Tanakh, but every book that was written after the Tanakh, there are some rabbis that dispute it. Okay, because if there's two Jews, there's three opinions. But if there's two rabbis, there's way more than two opinions. I don't even want to tell you, depending on which rabbis they are. You know. Yeah. Good. Yeah. Good. Let's continue. So, what does the Brisa say? The Brisa says as follows. The Brisa says that in the 10 Commandments, it says the word shamor and zachor, right? Regarding Shabbat, regarding the Sabbath, right? Good. Now, I want to explain to you guys something, especially those of you online that don't exactly know ancient Hebrew. The 10 Commandments are actually recorded in 2 of Moses' books. It's recorded in the book of Exodus, other known as Sefer Shemois, or I should say Sefer Shemois, other known as Exodus, and you have it again written in Chumash Devarim, other known as Deuteronomy. So in Deuteronomy and in Exodus, you have a repeat of the same 10 Commandments. However, there are a few differences in the wordings between the words in Exodus and the words in Deuteronomy, especially at least in the Hebrew text. Okay, in the translation, where these people, later generations, decided to translate it, could be that they accidentally translated it wrong. All right? Now, in Exodus, it says, Zachor, remember Shabbat, remember the Sabbath. And in Deuteronomy, it says Shamor, which means guard the Shabbat. Guard or remember. Guarding and remembering are 2 different words and actually depict 2 different concepts completely, right? And again, the rabbis basically said that they both apply to Shabbat. You have to remember it and you have to guard it. And there's differences in the halacha between remembering it and guarding it. I'm not going to get into the details, but there are differences. However, what did God say when he gave the 10 Commandments? Did he say remember or did he say guard? And he said both. God said 2 words at the same time, and both of them were, how do you say hearable?
Heard. Were like heard. They were heard.
They were both heard simultaneously by the nation of Israel, right? Now, the Gemara asked a question that says, hold on a second, could 2 voices be heard simultaneously? We just have here a verse that clearly 2 voices could be heard simultaneously in the 10 Commandments. So that seems to be proving our point. However, wait till the Gemara makes the twist and shows you that that's not proving the point, it's actually disproving the point, because it says as follows. Shamar v'zachar b'dibur echad nemru. These 2 words of guard and remember Shabbat were both said in one utterance, something that the mouth cannot speak, and the ear cannot hear. Which basically, this brisa says, excuse me, if you want to be the moderator, you have to be quiet when you're not moderating. Doesn't make a difference. But I can hear you, right? All right, good. Anyways, yes, by the way, I want to remind everybody online that if you want to participate in this class by asking a question, all you have to do is put it in the comments. You put it in the comments section, whatever platform you're on. It comes up on my computer. We have our moderator over here. If he feels that it's somewhat significant to the class, we will ask the question in the class. Remember, a question about what we're talking about must, if you want to ask a question during the main part of the class, it must be relevant to what we're talking about. If you want to ask some random question to the rabbi after the class, or towards the end of the class, we will have a question-answer session where you can do that. Okay? What's that? Only if you like and subscribe. We're going to check this up. I have no idea how to do that. But what? There's a way to check? No, but is there a way for us to check if that person subscribed? We don't know. We'll trust them. They subscribe. Okay. Anyways, let's continue. Okay. Anyways, this brisa essentially said, Yosef Zohar. I'm happy if you talk. I'm happy if you talk. I'm happy if I talk, but I'm not happy if we're both talking. All right? One of us, you want to talk? Turn on the mic, tell you what you want to say. Huh? Good. All right. The Brisa says that during the Ten Commandments, the fact that these two words were said simultaneously was a miraculous, unnatural event that only happened then and did not happen before and did not happen after. In other words, this is not something that is actually humanly viable. It is not humanly viable to hear two things at once, says the Brisa. Now, because the Brisa says that it's not humanly viable to say two things at once, therefore, that seems to contradict the fact that we can hear the shofar and the horns simultaneously. So again, the real question in the Gemara is, there seems to be a contradiction between Tanaic rulings. Now, if there was in fact a contradiction between Tanaic rulings, what would that prove? That would prove that there's actually a dispute on the matter. Now, the Mishnah seemingly says this rule as if it was held by everyone. If we're going to discover that there's a contradiction between this and another Tanaic ruling, means that there's a dispute on the matter, which means it's not necessarily the final ruling. And if that's the case, we need to try to analyze what in fact is the final ruling. However, the Gemara generally will try to disprove that there is an argument unless it's necessary. Okay, something else I've taught in this class a lot. Yosef Zohar, you should listen to this, it's very important. Okay, everybody thinks that the rabbis are always arguing. That's actually not true. We argue a lot, but we're not always arguing. There's a lot of things in the Torah that are agreed by every single person. Yeah?
Like what?
What's that?
Like what? What does every Jew agree on?
Every single rabbi agrees that you're not allowed to light a fire on Shabbos unless it's for life and death purposes. Yeah? You want me to list another thing? I can list hundreds of things that all the rabbis agree.
Yeah, but it's all Tanakh. Once you get
Yeah?
past Tanakh, they disagree with everything.
Wrong. So Shmuel, I want to tell you that that's 100% wrong. If you actually look at the list of halachas and the list of details of what we're obligated to do, take tefillin for example. Tefillin, we have to wear the black pockets on our head, between our eyes and on our hand. Everybody agrees with that. Yeah. Right? Everybody agrees what 4 parchments have to be in there. Everybody agrees what the shape of the tefillin's meant to be. Everybody agrees which where to start and where to end certain chapters. They disagree which order to put the parchments in the box. You understand? No. So they're agreeing on so many things, and you don't see that. You only see what people disagree. This is one of the diseases of today. Okay, people only see problems, and they don't see the beauty of what's actually good. There was once a professor, listen to this story. There was once a professor, and this professor, he came into this classroom, he took out a black magic marker and he made 3 dots on the whiteboard. There's a whiteboard, right? He makes 3 black dots on the whiteboard, okay? He turns around to the class, he says, my class, I want to ask you, what do you see here? One kid raises his head and says, I see 3 black dots. And another one raises his hand and says, I see a triangle, because he made the dots in the shape of a triangle. Another one says, I see 3 stars. Everybody sees something else, right? And the teacher turns around and says, how come no one noticed that the whole board is white? Right? You have a massive board of white, and a fraction of the board has 3 black dots, and that's what you see, right? You see the problems. You got to see the whole picture. The whole picture is when you see the problems together with the solution and the awesomeness of everything, that is when you have a true, wholesome perspective. You understand? So don't always look at the negative. If you look at all the things that the rabbis agree on, there are actually more things that the rabbis agree on than they disagree on. Right? And as a matter of fact, usually when the rabbis disagree, they're disagreeing on details within details of a particular law, and usually the main laws they completely agree 100%, no questions asked. Okay? Now, the reason why I'm saying this, why am I saying this? Because it's the truth. The reason why I'm saying this is when the Talmud finds a contradiction between Tanaic sages, we're not going to jump and say that there's a disagreement. We're going to do whatever we could to analyze how it's not necessarily a disagreement. Now, when we analyze that it's not a disagreement, we will very often learn halachot. We will learn rules from the possibility that it's not a disagreement. Why? Because the Gemara will always assume that there's no disagreement unless proven otherwise. Okay, are you guilty until proven innocent, or are you innocent until proven guilty? In the Talmud, we say everybody agrees until you prove otherwise. Okay, it's very important when you're learning Talmud to realize this. That whenever the Talmud is going to suggest that 2 rabbis might be arguing, the Talmud will do everything in its power to prove that they're not arguing, and only when it completely gives up and says it's impossible to argue, that they're not arguing, then the Gemara is going to determine that they are arguing, which means that the go-to is that there's no argument, right? And so that's what the Gemara is going to try to do here. Even though these two seemingly, the Mishnah, which seems that you could hear 2 things at once, and the Brisa that seems to say that you cannot hear 2 things at once, we're going to try to see how they're actually not disagreeing with each other as well. All right? You raised your hand there. You had a question, or you had somebody else ask the question here? No? No. Good.
Louise Cox said that
Yeah.
she sees the full moon.
It looks beautiful. Well, it's not the full moon. What's today? Today is Yudal. Actually, that's right. It's almost full. Tonight it should be a full moon, right? Ask the Jews. We know when it's a full moon. No thanks. All right? Yes. She's in Australia. It's probably night right now. It's the middle of the night. Actually, the truth is, she is in Australia. She is. I think it's a he or it's a she. I think it's a she. I don't know. Louise. It's a he or a she. I keep on. I'm not sure. I should look at the picture maybe. I think it's a she. Anyways, guys, listen up. Stop getting disfocused.
Yeah.
Back in track. Right now. Okay, she is actually in Australia, and in Australia, it's actually already the 15th, so she actually sees the full moon in Australia. She's actually correct. If it's a she and if she's there, right? Yeah. But I think she is, because she mentioned that she's from Sydney a few times already. Anyways, this is one of our frequent flyers. She comes all the time to our class. We want to thank you. After a year, she'll be here longer than you. Yeah. Actually, she probably is here longer than you. You only came a couple days ago. You started coming. Anyways. All right. So how to resolve this seemingly contradictory reality? Okay? Oh, here we go. So the Gemara answers, Lekach marif b'shofar. Therefore, this is the reason, the Gemara says, that the shofar must extend its voice longer. In other words, the Gemara is seemingly agreeing that you cannot hear 2 things at once, and therefore, like you may have theorized, right, is that the shofar being heard together with a horn is actually not the proper way of hearing it. And therefore, the Mishnah says that the person with the shofar blows for longer. So even though when you hear the beginning of the blowing, you're not hearing the shofar by itself, but because the horns stop and only the shofar continues, so therefore you're hearing the shofar only by itself, and therefore you're accomplishing the mitzvah when you hear the shofar when the horns stop. You understand?
Because we're not capable of separating
what's the
the sound.
mitzvah?
Huh?
Because we're not capable of separating the sound.
So again, right now, what we're discussing in the Gemara here, okay? What we're discussing in the Gemara here is the Gemara is seemingly agreeing that you cannot hear two sounds at once, and he's saying that's the reason why it pushed it off.
But you
right.
can hear them, you cannot separate them.
Whatever it is, according to the way the Gemara is accepting now, you cannot hear two things, meaning you're not fulfilling your obligation of hearing the shofar if you heard it together with the horns, and that's why the horns have to stop so that the shofar extends, right? And that's how you are accomplishing the mitzvah.
Yeah, but
What's the mitzvah?
the Mishnah gave a reason.
Rabbi Kopel.
Yeah.
So what is the mitzvah?
The mitzvah is to hear the shofar, but you're hearing the shofar by itself after the horns stop.
So the mitzvah is to hear kol shofar.
Yeah, well that every
That's what we said in the beginning.
who said otherwise? No one said otherwise. Oh, of course the mitzvah is to hear the shofar. That's obvious. The only question is if you're yotza the shofar when you're also hearing it together with trumpets.
But the Mishnah gave a reason.
That's the question.
So it's affecting why
So-
you're extending.
So that's what. So the Gemara asked the question. Seemingly, you can't hear two things at once, right? And we even brought a brisa that says that only miraculously in the time of the time of Mount Sinai you were able to hear two things at once, right? And so the Gemara accepts that reasoning and says therefore that's why the Mishnah says that the shofar must extend, because if the shofar did not extend, we would have a problem because we wouldn't ever hear the shofar. So because, in other words, the Gemara is saying that because the shofar is extending, therefore you are accomplishing the mitzvah because it's extending.
You're hearing it in the end.
And that's
Also, if you hear it in the beginning.
who said the beginning? No, that's so you're going ahead. You have to understand step by step. Right now, the Gemara is conceding that you cannot hear two things at once, and that's why we blow the shofar for longer, because if you did not blow the shofar for longer, you would not be accomplishing the mitzvah. Okay? Let's continue. What's that? I don't know. Again, you said it from a reasoning. Your reasoning doesn't hold weight in the Talmudic thought process.
Predicting what the Gemara is. Because that was the question. What did the Gemara say?
First of all, you're going to see the Gemara is going to go back and forth. We're going to say a few different things. Huh?
I learned a little Gemara with you so far. So
That's it. You're getting better, right?
shut me down. I got it exactly right.
No. First of all, I was not arguing with the reasoning. I'm arguing with using the reasoning as the only reason why that's a Talmudically relevant question was because there is a brisa that says you cannot hear two things at once. If there was no such brisa, we would say, okay, so you could hear two things at once. The whole question is that now that we have a brisa that proves that you cannot hear two things at once, now it's a question, well, then how are you listening to the shofar? Yeah?
It says, the Mishnah says the
Yeah.
reason for why they would extend it. It's the main part of the mitzvah, not to fulfill the mitzvah.
Again, the Mishnah did not tell you why we extend the shofar. No, it didn't. No, it says because, you're right, it says because the mitzvah is shofar. But it doesn't say that we extend. No, it doesn't. Again, it does not say that we extend it because if we didn't extend it, you would not be owed to the mitzvah. That's not what it said.
That's my question.
That's not what it said, and the Gemara is going to deal with it. What's your question?
The question is that it gave a reason. It didn't say to fulfill the mitzvah. It said that the reason why they do it is so that it's
Right.
the main part of the mitzvah. They would have said that.
So correct. So when it says that it's the main part of the mitzvah, it could just mean we're trying to show the world that that's the main mitzvah. Not necessarily is it saying that without that you wouldn't be yotze.
That's my question. So if it wasn't that,
You understand?
if it was actually needed to be Yotze, the Mishnah would have said the reason why we do it is because we need to fulfill the mitzvah.
Again, not necessarily. Not necessarily. Let's deal with how the Gemara is going to analyze the Mishnah, etc. Okay, we'll deal with that. All right.
And then the question is about any other noises.
Okay. So again, you have to understand that right now the Gemara is accepting the perspective that if you hear two things, if you hear the shofar together with another sound, you're not yotza the mitzvah. Right? That's essentially what it's accepting. Now the Gemara is asking on that another question. Yeah? And the next question is as follows. Lemeimra de chishama soif tkiya beloy tchilas kiya yotza. Umemela tchilas kiya beloy soif tkiya yotza. If you're going to tell me that in fact, if you hear a sound together with the shofar, you did not fulfill your obligation. If you're going to tell me that. And therefore, they extend the sound of the shofar, because if you extend the sound of the shofar, therefore, now you heard the shofar alone, now it helps. However, you did not hear the beginning of the blowing, you only heard the end of the blowing. Now, if you're going to suggest that in fact is how we resolve this problem, you'll be forced to also suggest that you do not have to hear the beginning and the end of the blowing. You could hear the end again. You could hear the end without the beginning. And the Gemara says if you could hear the end without the beginning, then seemingly you could also hear the beginning without the end. Now the Gemara is saying this because the Gemara is about to bring a proof that that's not necessarily true. It's not necessarily true that if you hear part of the blowing and not the other part of the blowing, that you actually fulfilled your obligation. It's very possible that you didn't.
How does the Gemara make the jump though? How does the Gemara make the jump from, if you hear it in the end, sometimes you don't hear it in the beginning, so that means you could hear the beginning and not the end?
Because the point is, if you're saying that you could hear the end without the beginning, means if you hear part of the sound, you are Yotza. So what's the difference if you hear the beginning or the end? What's the difference? What's the difference? It seems to be the same thing. You're hearing part of the sound. That's what the Gemara is going to say.
Maybe the end is the most important part.
Who says the end is most? Okay, could be. Let's see if the Gemara can bring a proof that the end is more important than the beginning, then it might answer that. But the Gemara seemingly won't bring that as a proof, and therefore it's not going to be relevant. All right? We're going to read the last. We're not doing that bad on time. But yes, I want to read here the next Tashma. We have over here Tashma. Tashma is one of the most common keywords that I've told you in the past. Okay? Tashma. Come and hear. Yeah? Tashma is a very important keyword. It literally means come and hear. However, if you learned from me before, you'd know that Tashma has a lot of meaning beyond just come and hear. Ruvain. What does Tashma mean as a keyword? No, give him the mic. Where's your moderator? You see, you're trying to trade stocks in the middle of my class here.
I'm arguing with this
Okay, let me tell you something. Moderation doesn't mean you argue with them on the thing. They argue. Your moderation means that if they say something, yes, no comment warfare in the middle thing. No, that's not moderation. I'm sorry, I don't allow this. No, like I have to read up on them and try to see all the things that you told this guy. Maybe they're not accurate. No more arguing. No arguing on this thing. Okay, we argue in the class. Listen, moderation. Hey, Mr. Moderator, if it's a good enough comment to be mentioned in class, then you stop me and you mention it in class. If it's not a good enough comment to mention in class, go on. I don't want you to sit there arguing on my comments feed. That's not what it's for.
I'm not arguing.
All right.
You gotta go on your YouTube and ban this guy because he's messing up the feed.
Who?
He's posting Yeshka stuff.
Who?
This guy, Dr. J. Smith.
I don't see anything.
Huh?
You don't see anything on the screen.
You don't see it there because he's blocked from the stream.
Oh, you blocked it?
It's only blocked on Restream, not on YouTube.
What can you do? You know, there's some people that they just want to haka training, and you know, whatever. Leave them alone. So, okay, Ruvain, what is Tashma?
Bring a quote, maybe.
What?
Quote.
Why would it bring a quote? Huh? I'm trying. You see, I'm very happy. Last time you told me you don't know it all, and now at least you know part of it. Next time you'll know the whole thing. Tashma is one of the most important keywords in the Gemara. It literally means come and listen. Whenever you see the word Tashma, it's actually telling you numerous things. Number one, it's telling you that the Gemara is dealing with an issue that needs to be resolved. If you get to the word Tashma and you're not sure what issue exists in the Gemara, you need to reread the Gemara because there is an issue. Okay, Tashma is always coming to resolve an issue. Sometimes it's trying to resolve the dispute between two rabbis. Sometimes it's just coming to resolve its own issue independent of everything else. Okay? Now, once you know that there's an issue, the Tashma is going to bring a quote in an attempt to resolve said issue. And you have to be prepared for this. You have to prepare your mind when you go into a Tashma that it's going to try to resolve the issue. Now, again, what's the issue that we're dealing with right now is that the Gemara is guessing that you can hear part of the shofar and not the other part of the shofar. The Tashma is going to try to reject that hypothesis. Yeah. Tashma, come and listen. I'm going to tell you a question or a challenge. Talk about Ishoina. Umashach b'shniyah kishnayim. Ein biyadei ala achas. Amai tistalik lebetarti psuke. Yeah. So the Gemara basically says as follows. The Gemara says, listen, you're listening. Focus a little bit. The Gemara basically quotes another brisa. And in this brisa, you know what it says? This brisa says, what happens if you blow, instead of blowing 2 tekiyot, you blow 1 long tekiya. Okay? What is a tekiya? What is a tekiya? No. Tekiya is a 1 long. Doot. Now, if you know how, if you ever heard the shofar before, okay, you blow a long one, then you blow short ones, and then you blow a long one. And that's called a set. There's a set. A set is always begins with a long one and ends with a long one. Now, when you end it with a long one, the next set starts with a long one also. So usually you have a long one, and then a long one, and then meaning it might sound like you have 2 long ones in a row. Really, 1 long one is the end of the previous set, and the second long one is the beginning of the next set. What happens if you make a really long tekiya at the end of a set, and you want this long tekiya to be both the end tekiya and the beginning tekiya? You want them to be both simultaneously, and therefore you blow it extra long so that you had a long enough tekiya for both of them. Huh? Why can't you do it?
What were the middle ones? Because it's defined by the fact that it finishes.
Yeah, how do you know that?
Because we don't have a set time. Otherwise, we'd have a set time for one, but we don't have a set time for one.
There is a set time for what are you talking about? There's a certain amount of time. Each of the blows there's a certain time period that the blows have to be. Yeah. So a tekiya has to be the length of 3 shvarims and 9 teruas, and if you're doing the shvarim and the teruah, it has to be long. Basically, the tekiya has to be the same length as the middle set. So if the middle set is longer, then you have to have a longer one, and if the middle set is shorter, then you can have a shorter one, right? And again, if you blow longer, it's okay. You're allowed to blow longer, but you cannot blow shorter. But let's say you blow 1 tekiya that's, say, the length of 3 tekiyas, right? So could you say that it counts as 2 tekiyas? The answer is no, you cannot say that. But not because of your reason, but because that's what we determine here in the Gemara. Right? Again, you might not like certain Jewish rules, but the Jewish rules are the Jewish rules. Now, sometimes you can make a logical analysis and it'll be consistent with the Jewish rules, but the real reason why if you blow 1 long tekiya, it does not count any more than 1, is not God himself, but because the Brisa says so. He said the Brisa says if you blow 1 long tekiya, even though it's as long as 2 tekiyas, it's only counted as 1, it's not counted as 2. Right? Now says the Gemara, if you're going to tell me that if you hear the end of the tekiya without the beginning, right, then you could hear the beginning without the end either also. And therefore, if you have 1 long tekiya, think about it. I heard the beginning of a long tekiya, and then I stopped, right? And then I heard the end of the long tekiya, and then I stopped. So it should be 2 tekiyas. Meaning, the first tekiya that I was meant to hear, I heard the beginning of a tekiya, and the second tekiya I was meant to hear, I heard the end of the tekiya. And therefore, I heard everything that I was meant to hear. So what's the big deal?
The question is either by the sender or the receiver.
Again, from this brisa, it seems to suggest that you are not yotze if you hear part. The reason why you're not yotze if you hear part, why the Gemara is assuming, why else would this be an issue? Why else would it be an issue to say that if you hear 1 long tekiya, why doesn't it count as 2? It should count as 2. The very fact that it says it doesn't count to count for 2 seemingly proves that you must hear the beginning and the end of a blow in order for it to count, right? And since it's one long tekiah, meaning it only had one beginning and it only had one end, therefore it only counts as 1. That's how the Gemara is analyzing this brisa right now. Now the Gemara might reanalyze the brisa, but right now the Gemara is analyzing the brisa to suggest that you must hear the beginning and you must hear the end. And that would be the reason why it only counts as 1, because there was only one beginning and one end. Yeah? Yeah. And the Gemara basically throws out that reasoning and says no. So he says, Psuke tikiyasa mehadadi loy paskinon. He says, because you cannot split one tekiyah. So he says the reason is because you cannot split one tekiyah. The reason is not because you have to hear the beginning and the end. Remember the hypothesis and the debunking of the hypothesis. Okay? Yes, you hear me, Yosef Zoyar? Is that you over there? Is that you over there? Hacking a Chinik? Is that you, Joseph, or that's a different Joseph? It's not you? I have to catch my students over here chatting with you online. Huh? No, we're not getting involved. Right? Let them, whoever wants to hack a Chinik out of my class in the comments can hack a Chinik. If you want to participate in my class, ignore all that garbage, okay? And we'll deal with it when we deal with it. Zell. All right? Where are we holding? Why are you late? Why were you in the other room? Shish. You don't like my class? Then why were you, if you loved it so much, how could you miss it for such a long time? Anyways, let's continue. It's almost like my live class is kind of like my YouTube class. You know, people come in and out whenever they want. You know, like the people on YouTube, the same thing. You know, they come in the middle, they leave in the middle, they whatever they want. You know, it's like the same thing in my class. Chutzpah. We're gonna have to get some discipline over here. Anyways, let's continue. Again, the quote basically. You have to understand the Gemara brings a quote and then analyzes it. And then sometimes it debunks the analysis. And that's what happened here. The Gemara brought the quote. The quote basically says if you hear one long blow, it does not count as 2 blows. The Gemara analyzes it as saying that the reason why it doesn't count as 2 blows is because there's only one beginning and one end and you need to hear both. That's the analysis of the quote. The Gemara says, no, that's not a necessary analysis. You can analyze it that you cannot split one sound. Meaning, if you heard the end of the sound, fine. If you heard the beginning of the sound, fine. But you cannot split one sound into 2.
Just call it 2 sounds.
You cannot take one sound and split it in half. Meaning, if you heard half of it, again, we're saying hypothetically, you can argue that the reason behind that statement is not because you need to hear the beginning and the end, but because you cannot take a scissors and cut a sound in half.
No video editing.
No video editing the shofar blowing. That's it. All right, good. And that's where we're going to stop for today. Bezrat Hashem will continue tomorrow at the next Tashma. And for now, if anybody has questions on the class, we'll go for you first. And if not, we'll give you guys a chance to ask questions that are not necessarily on the topic of the class, including some of this garbage that I hear is going on in the chat room over here. Maybe we'll deal with some of that. But right now, we'll start out. Does anybody have any questions on understanding what I've actually said in the class? Right? Yes. Yes. You have decent questions. I don't know who's this. Who's this? Where's our moderator? Our moderator made a whole big deal to be our moderator. He walked out.
Dr. J. Smithers has been spamming.
What is he? What is he saying?
He's putting a bunch of stuff from the Bible and trying to prove Yeshua with it.
Okay.
It's all like very basically obvious.
So let me tell you guys something. Let me tell you something.
He's like, he adds stuff to the Hillim to make it sound like.
First of all, I want to tell you something. Who is this guy, Jay Smithers? Okay, let me tell you something. I once met in Jerusalem. Taking pictures of me. Can I know that? I once met a group of missionaries in Jerusalem, and one of them was asking me, "Why don't you believe in this Jewish guy that they believe in?"
In French, we call him the acrobat.
The acrobat. Why you call him that?
He makes all kind of moves.
We call him Yoshka, and in Yiddish we call him Yoshka. Okay, why don't we believe in Yoshka? So I said, first of all, before you even talk to me about Yoshka, I want you to prove 3 things. So here you go, Dr. J. Smithers. Prove to me 3 things, and then I'll consider, we'll even enter into a conversation. Otherwise, there's no point of entering a conversation. The first thing I want you to prove to me is that this guy ever existed. There's a very good argument to argue that this guy never existed to begin with. He never existed. It was a historic fiction. Some people came around and wrote a book about somebody that never existed, and they said that he existed, but he never existed to begin with. Okay? That's a fact. Okay? By the way, even in Jewish scholars, there's certain Jewish scholars that say the guy never existed. There's some Jewish scholars say that he did exist, but some Jewish scholars say the guy never existed to begin with. Right? Now, there is a story in the Talmud spoken about Yeshua Noitri. However, if you take the Christian timeline and the Talmudic timeline, they're about 150 years different. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the guy didn't exist. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's different stories. Because in the Christian world, very often when they wanted to make a point, they just changed history. So it could be that they changed the timeline somewhere in that Vatican or whoever it is. They changed the history, they rewrote the history, the timeline to make it more sense. Because according to the Talmudic timeline, this guy existed about 150 years before the temple was destroyed. The Christians moved it 150 years later to suggest that the temple was destroyed because we killed this guy, right? Now, if in fact he existed 150 years before the temple was destroyed, that ruins their whole point, right? So they changed history to try to make it look like it was closer to the destruction of the temple, right? That is one argument that's made. The point is that there's no clear proof that this guy ever existed, okay? It's very possible. All of the books that record his existence were written way after he died. Some opinions up to 120 years after he died. The first book was written 120 years after the guy died. There's other opinions that maybe it was only 40 years, but there's most of all of the books that record anything that happened to this guy were recorded years after he died, which means they're not accurate at all. How can you trust the accuracy of a book that was written so far after a guy died? So you're going to tell me, so here's the whole Christian missionary. They say, well, this guy, he did X, Y, Z, and therefore, hold on, who said he did X, Y, Z? Maybe the guy made it up. Maybe whoever wrote the book made it up. So first of all, if you want me to even get into the argument, you have to prove to me that the guy actually existed in fact. Did the guy ever exist? Now, once you prove me that he existed, you have problem number 2. Prove to me that he was a prophet. Okay? Even according to the writings, it's not so clear that he himself believed that he was a prophet. He may have believed that he was a teacher, a preacher, an inspirer. Not necessarily did he believe he's a prophet. So that's number 2. Number 3, if you're going to prove to me that he existed and you're going to prove to me he's a prophet, prove to me that you have any clue what he's ever said. Which, once again, the books were written so far after it, so everything that it says in the books, perhaps he never said. Anything that it says in the books perhaps never happened, right? It could all be historic fiction, which everything in the books say. So why should I read a book and try to disprove to you how what he did compares to the Bible, which, by the way, we could, right? We could do, and there are some rabbis that do that. Not me. You can look. There's an organization called Jews for Judaism. You can look it up online. You can deal with those rabbis. They'll actually do tit for tat. They're going to look at what they're going to say. Well, what does the book say? And what does the Tanakh say? And they're going to try to prove that it's inconsistent with the Tanakh, even as the book is written right now. Right? However, I say, why even enter the book? Who said these books were accurate? I need to prove to you that this guy didn't do what Messiah needs to do. I need to prove that to you. Who says the guy even did it? Who said he did it? Maybe it was just made up. Right? Especially when you look at the Vatican and some of their practices, they very often change history. They very often censored certain books and made up information to basically make their point look better. Right? So you're telling me that I need to basically prove that a liar didn't make a good enough lie to you hear what I'm saying? You're asking me that I should basically prove that a liar didn't lie good enough to be consistent with the Bible. Does that make any sense? That's stupid. That's idiotic, right? I believe that it's possibly all just a lie. Never ever happened, right? It's very possible. There's no witnesses. It's possibly never. So you want to tell me that I need to listen to this thing that I think is a lie, and then I need to prove to you how this lie is inconsistent with the Bible. That's idiotic. That's insane. That's stupidity. Why should I waste my time dealing with this mishugis? Why should I deal with it? Yeah. You understand what I'm saying? So that's why I don't even want to talk about this whole conversation. I'm not going to start saying, did he do this and did he do that? I'm going to say he did nothing. He did nothing, and he never existed. Right? Prove to me he existed. Then we'll go to the next stage. Right? Prove to me the guy was there. Huh? What's that? Who? I told you there's a story in the Talmud that speaks about a Yeshua Noitri. However, it is about 150 years off the Christian timeline. As I said, it could be that the Christians lied to make their story sound better, so they moved up the story. They moved the story to 150 years later, right? It could be they did, or it could be they just made up the whole story to begin with. Yeah. Anyways, is there any questions? I see a lot of information going up. Is there any questions that you think?
The last thing that Sanders said to refute that, so you can show, he's like, refute what I'm saying, refute what I'm saying. He put too many things to refute, but just refute the last one.
I don't know what he said. What does he say?
It's a quote from Exodus. Can you read it?
Again, as I said, you want me to accept his lie and then tell me how to refute it from Exodus. I'm telling you that I don't think the guy ever wrote a book. I don't think the guy ever really existed. It's all historic fiction. So I'm not going to stoop to his level. If I'm going to, he's quoting the Torah, but he's trying to compare it to a lie. Why should I stoop to his level? Why should I stoop to his level and try to explain to him how his lie is inconsistent with the Torah? Right? It's a lie. The whole thing is a lie. It was made up. It was historic fiction. Even, as I said, even if the guy actually existed, everything that they have is not what he taught. It is what somebody else wrote many years later, which is highly inconsistent with truth. Right? So I'm not going to, as I said, the second I try to prove to him that his stupidity is inconsistent with with Exodus, I have a problem, because then I'm accepting the fact that he's lying. I don't want to accept his lie. I don't want to accept that that's reality, and now I need to prove that the reality is inconsistent with the Torah. I'm not going to do that. I'm sorry. I'm not going to waste my time with that. I think it's wrong. It's intellectually dishonest to enter into such an argument. Right? Again, tell Mr. whoever he is to prove that Yashka ever existed. Prove to me that he existed. Prove to me that he himself claimed that he's a prophet. And prove to me, number 3, is that you know anything that he's ever said. You don't know anything that he said. Everything that was written in the books could be made up. Right? Maybe none of this happened. You want to prove to me that what you claim happened is inconsistent with Genesis. Sugar. So I'm not sure who Talmudic Time says, I don't know, I don't understand how that proves anything.
He's talking to doctors.
All right. Okay. Anyways, Mr. Doctor, whoever you are, I don't even see what you're saying, because apparently they figured out how to block you. I can't see what you're saying, but everyone else could. No, I don't see any.
Did somebody press to block him on the Restream chat?
Somebody blocked him on the Restream, so I can't see him, but everybody else could see him. Now we need to block him. Block him on YouTube, Zell. You could block him on YouTube directly or no? Anyways, any other questions? I can block him on YouTube.
No, but Rabbi, every quote that he quotes in English from Tehillim or something, he changes like words. Like Hakifuni means to surround, and he said it means pierce. And it says Hakifuni and
So basically,
he's saying it says pierce your hands and feet, but it's really Hakifuni means to surround.
Correct. So he's misquoting the Bible. So as I said, when you have a person who's built on a lie and wants to lie, I'm not surprised. You see, I don't know why you're surprised. Why you're surprised with this? You're surprised that somebody that's built on a lie lies. By the way, you should know that this is very common amongst religious people, etc. Anyways, that's it. I think if anybody has a question to me as a rabbi, fine. If you want to go with this whole, you want to argue with this doctor, whoever it is, then you're going to do it without me in the class. I'm leaving. Zell. All right, I'm giving you 10 seconds. If I see any question that seems relevant to me as a rabbi, then good. If not, where is that?
Yeah, I think it's important that Rosh Hashanah is coming up.
Rosh Hashanah is coming up. Baruch Hashem, you should go to a synagogue. If you're not sure where a synagogue is, you can get a hold of me. I'll help you find the closest synagogue to your place. Yes. Good. Anyways, can I know how to? Good. We're going to end the class. Hold on, what's this for someone? Oh no, you see, Talmudic Tom's still arguing with this Yoshka guy. Anyways, we're gonna have to block this Yoshka guy because I don't like this. I don't need this. This is a Christian. You want to have a Christian debate? Go have it somewhere else. Right now we're talking Talmud and that's it. All right, that's it. We're going. We're out of here. Sei gesund. Have a good day. See you later. Enjoy your argument with these. I don't know, whatever you want. Enjoy. Have a good time.